everybody! In this tip video, we'll take a look at how to paint using light washes to build depth and dimension for a realistic orchid. As usual, I started with an accurate drawing. I used masking fluid around the outside edges of the stem and orchid and allow to fully dry. I begin by mixing several yellows together in a very light, watery consistency to establish my lightest values. It should be noted, some areas the white of the paper has been left without a color wash to achieve some of the highlights in the orchid. I recommend a grayscale as a helpful tool in keeping values correct. So as you can see, I painted the first wash with my watery yellow pigment. Using the same consistency of yellow mixture, I began the second layering of color to the orchid. Where you can see definite shadows, I paint a light yellow wash over some of the existing veining, making sure to use light pressure. This ensures that you won't disturb the detail of the veining, which we will come back to later. Once that wash is in place, I allow it to dry fully before the next layer and move on to the stem of the orchid. So now that we're working on the stem, I mix sap green and leaf green in a watery mixture, making sure to keep the mixture light in value. It's always helpful to refer back to the reference photo with grayscaled image to determine if our values are correct. Keep in mind we can always add additional color washes to darken an area. So I added gold ochre to the yellow color and begin building the dark areas in the shadow of the orchid. Once that wash is painted, I allow it to dry completely and move to the upper stem of my orchid. At this point, the washes will look a bit crude and underdeveloped. Just keep in mind there are many layers to complete before we are finished. Using the same watery consistency of the green mixture, I painted my next layer using light pressure and mainly the tip of the brush. If I add too much in, you can see I lift the color back up to maintain a thin layering of color. It should be noted the masking fluid keeps color within the boundaries beautifully. Later, when all the washes and detail have been painted and completely dry, I remove the masking fluid and clean up any edges necessary using a dry brush technique. As you can see, the white of the paper remains in many parts of the orchid as final highlights. Keep in mind we still have many layers left to paint. Once that layer is complete and left to dry, I move down to the lower orchid leaf to add in detail. Using a thickened consistency of permanent rose and a double-aught brush to achieve these tiny lines, I make sure to vary the pressure of my brush to create the veins. Relying on my reference photo as my guide, as well as the live orchid I'm using to paint from, the visual reference of the veins in the photo need to be carefully painted in order to maintain a realistic look to your watercolor. It is suggested to use a piece of scrap watercolor paper and test your ability to recreate veins accurately. That way, any corrections are made before you paint them on the final watercolor. If you've enjoyed this tip video and would like to see more of my full-length step-by-step tutorials, please visit my website where you can sign up and be notified when my online watercolor tutorials will be available. Thank you for watching, liking, and subscribing.